Hello, coming to you from one of the highlight cities of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Chaos Bryce Journey. An Out of the Dust board game is a game that gets played that you hadn't previously played in a year or more. In other words, it's been a while since you last played it. But why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. In case you're tuning in for the first time, I'm the moderator of the Out of the Dust Geek List on Board Game Geek. The Out of the Dust Geek List is one of the recurring monthly geek lists on the site, joining such other popular ones like Favorite New to Me of the Month. The main focus of this podcast is highlighting some of the Out of the Dust games that I and other contributors to the Geek List have been playing. There are a few other short segments on this podcast as well, sometimes unrelated and sometimes tied in with an Out of the Dust perspective. This is episode 11.
Oh gosh, I'm say, the friends up from here are flexing.
I had a chance to bring Empire Builder Out of the Dust this month, which I was very happy about. This is one of my all-time favorites and one of my perfect 10 rated games. The only reason it's dusty is because I own the entire series of Crayon Rails and like to cycle through the entire series before repeating a play of a particular entry. I last played it 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days ago. Spanning all of North America, Empire Builder is one of the largest maps in the Crayon Rail series. It doesn't have the diversity of terrain most of the other maps possess, but the placement of the major cities combined with the giant block of Rocky Mountain terrain still make it an engaging and interesting map. One can play any of the maps without a familiarity of whatever map's geography is featured, but it does help. And with that in mind, for anyone looking to get into the Crayon Rail series, I do recommend starting with whatever map happens to feature where you live. For Americans, that will be Empire Builder. Empire Builder is my most played game in this series, so if there's a chance of any of them not getting dusty in between cycles of plays, it's probably this one. I have been known to play the computer version from time to time too, though obviously not in a while. I need to reinstall it actually, after having to do a factory reset earlier in the year on my laptop. Let's see what a contributor brought out of the dust. Lo, username Lohengrin, brought Tokaido out of the dust. He last played it 3 years and 4 months ago and currently rates it a 6 out of 10. He writes, I find it hard to believe over 3 years have passed since I played Tokaido. Although it's not a game I can see myself playing very often, I just assumed I've had more occasions to actually play it. But I guess not. Probably because there are other gateway games I'd play with 3 or 4. But in this case, my wife and I dusted it off to entertain my sister and her 2 kids. My sister and her kids do play some Euros, like Ticket to Ride and Carcassonne. I pulled out Tokaido specifically because its rules are about the same difficulty level as those. That and my niece is a bit of a Japanophile. It worked okay, everyone stayed engaged, although my poor nephew was clearly exhausted, and as usual, my wife won. Thanks for the contribution, Lo. For a nice, relaxing, low-key game, nothing beats Tokaido. This reminds me, I still need to try out the Matsuri expansion, which I got late last year for my copy. Fun story about my copy is second-hand, and when I received it in the mail, I was surprised to learn the person I had acquired it from had upgraded his copy with real Japanese yen coins. How cool is that? That's just one of the times I've been pleasantly surprised by a used game I got in a trade. Reaction segment time. This week I'll be reacting to the Board Game Geek live coverage of GenCon, which I tuned into all 4 days of the convention. Just a few years ago, this live streaming was almost unwatchable. Technical issues and lag abounded, and it was a torturous experience to try to watch anything at all. I don't know if the streaming technology has gotten significantly better lately, if the technical crew doing the filming is just more seasoned and experienced, or some combination of the two, but the coverage this year was really good. What technical issues there were seemed to be few and far between, and were quickly resolved. For the first time, it felt like I was there at the con! It was a lot of fun, and the chat room was energetic and a good time, too. Both BGG's GenCon livestream and the Dice Tower's Origins livestream, which was also a great experience this year, work very similarly as a series of publishers are interviewed and show their new and upcoming games. Seeing the games close up in this format was very illuminating. There were some games I was interested in previously, but lost interest in after hearing about them in more detail. One of those was the new Kemet expansion, Seth. I had no idea this expansion turned the game into a one versus all game. No thanks, not interested in that. That's a genre of games I'm pretty tired of for the most part. It's a rare 1v-all game that interests me nowadays. There were also some games that I wasn't excited about until I saw them laid out on the table. One of those was Root. The asymmetric animal-themed area control game was getting a lot of hype leading up to the con, but I wasn't buying into it. But after seeing it set up and hearing the detailed description of how it works, yeah, I'm interested now. And there were some games I was already interested in that I got even more interested in after hearing more about them. New Bruno Cathala titles always grab my attention when they're announced, and so Coimbra was already on my radar. But after seeing it in action on the live stream, I started salivating in delicious Euro anticipation. Oh man, that game looks really good. Is this the big follow-up Cathala hit we've all been waiting for since 5 Tribes? Another one that I'm even more interested in after seeing it in action is the new Disney-themed game Villainous from publisher Wonderforge. This was on my radar because my wife is a huge Disney villain fan, and I'm pretty sure she'll get a kick out of this game. But after seeing how it works, now I'm excited for it too. Someone involved with the game was in the chat room and telling everyone how an expansion is already being planned. In fact, visitors to Wonderforge's site can vote for their favorite Disney villains to be featured in the new expansion. So I browsed on over to the site myself so I could vote 20 times for the Horde King from the underappreciated Black Cauldron. That guy is awesome and totally needs to be featured in a game. On the What Have I Been Playing segment this week, I'm going to talk about the new cooperative game right game, Cahoots. From designer Ken Gruhl of Happy Salmon fame, Cahoots reminds me a lot of a card game version of Dimension, the popular puzzle game from publisher Cosmos. Both of these games utilize a deck of goal cards that dictate the rules players must play by during any one particular game. In the case of Dimension, players must manipulate marbles and build a pyramid adhering to the dictates of the goal cards. In Cahoots, players must play cards numbered 1 to 7 and 1 of 4 colors from a limited hand into 1 of 4 piles, trying to make the top card of each pile match one of the goal cards in play. For example, a goal card might require players to have green or pink cards on top of all 4 piles. Or a goal card might require players to have the green and pink cards showing add up to 10 exactly. The goal cards are complicated by the rule that players can only play a card from their hand on one of the piles if the card matches either the number or color showing. If players manage to clear all the required quantity of goal cards before their deck of player cards runs out, they win the game. But if the player deck runs out first, or if the players get into a situation where they can't play any more cards from their hand, then they lose. My friend Warren taught me this game when just he and I were left at the end of a Saturday gaming get-together at Spielbound. Come to think of it, he was also the one who taught me the game. So I guess we're all about playing games that require players to arrange numbered cards in a particular order. That's one of my wife's favorite things to do in games as well, so this goes to a high priority on my wish list. I think she'll like it a lot, and if it gets played anywhere near as much as we play the game, our third most played game ever, then I don't think Cahoots will be getting dusty anytime soon. Obscure Bryce Game segment time. This week I'm going to tell you about an obscure 2003 kids game from Hava called Zauberhut, or Magic Hat in English. This is a game from designer Veronica Homan, who has 3 titles to her credit in the BGG database, all children's game, and all quite obscure. In fact, according to BGG stats, there are only 21 people in the entire world who own one of her games. With 18 people claiming ownership of Zauberhut, it's actually the least obscure of her trio of obscure games. In Zauberhut, each player is an apprentice wizard trying to sneak into the pantry and enjoy the invisible chocolate. But in order to do this, you have to be wearing the magic hat, which makes you invisible. Evidently, you have to be invisible to eat invisible chocolate. To accomplish this, one player starts off with the magic hat. On a player's turn, they pick one of the 6 face-down tokens numbered 1 to 6, and move that number of spaces either forward or backward on the 21-space-long track leading to the invisible chocolate pantry. The token is turned face down at the end of the turn, enabling other players to pick it if they wish as well, and introducing a limited memory mechanic into the game. If a player lands on the player with the magic hat, they steal the magic hat and mix up the numbered moved tokens. This process is repeated by each player in turn, either moving forward or backward to try and steal the magic hat from the player who currently possesses it, until the player who does possess it manages to reach the end of the track and the invisible chocolate pantry. All things considered, it's a decent kids game and pretty clever. Its use of the memory mechanic is innovative and fresh, and while it's important to keep tabs on which numbers are which on the moved tokens, it's more important to use timing to tactical effect by stealing the hat towards the end of the track and making a run for that invisible chocolate cabinet before the other players can catch you. It's a fairly quick game, doesn't overstay its welcome, and is one of those quality Hobbit titles that parents won't mind playing with their kids. And, as is usually the case with Hobbit games, it's got great fun bits. I introduced it to my 4-year-old recently, and he had great fun putting the cloth hat on his apprentice pawn each time he stole the magic hat away. I'm going to try out a new segment this week. Where is the game now? In this segment, I'm going to take a look at a hot game from a year ago, or a hot game from 5 years ago, and see how the game has weathered the year or years. By hot game, I mean one that was getting a lot of hype leading up to or after its release, was being purchased a lot, and or was being played a lot. Some of these games may be ones that I have not necessarily played before. But as someone interested in the historical aspect of board games, including recent history, I'm interested in hyped and trendy games and how gamers wound up receiving and perceiving those games in the time since the release. My sources for the information included in this segment are going to be the stat keepers of Board Game Geek, including, but not limited to, the most purchased, top up-and-comers, most played, and new-to-me monthly geek lists, and the All of Your Lovely Games stat-keeping geek list. Now, generally speaking, most games are going to experience some decrease in purchased and played stats over time. So what I'll be looking at is how much of a decrease happened and if the critical reception has changed over time. One of the hot games from August 2017 was Tiny Epic Quest, which was fulfilled via Kickstarter and then released to the general public just in time for GenCon 2017. From designer Scott Alms and publisher Gameland Games, Tiny Epic Quest debuted at position 15 of the most played geek list, which is very impressive. But just 2 months later, it was off the top 50 most played geek list altogether. From its peak of just over 1,100 unique gamers playing it in a single month, it has settled in at just under 200 unique gamers per month. For comparison, Tiny Epic Defenders, the least popular entry in the series, but still a top 2,000 game, got about 70 unique players last month, and Tiny Epic Kingdoms, the oldest entry in the series, got about 60 unique players last month. Tiny Epic Galaxies, the only entry in the series rated higher than Tiny Epic Quest, got about 440 unique players last month. The Top Up-and-Comers is an interesting geek list that compares how many copies of a game were added as owned by users and compares it to the number from the previous month to get a hotness ratio. Tiny Epic Quest debuted at number 11 on that list, being bookended by the deluxe edition of Innovation and Soul Last Days of a Star. It's pretty tough to stay on that list for long, and Tiny Epic Quest dropped off after only 2 months on the top 100 hotness, which indicated it didn't have much sustainment beyond the initial fulfillment and general release of the game. But it performed better on the most purchased list, debuting at number 2 on that list and lasting 7 months before dropping off the top 100, which is not bad. It might be a better overall indicator of the game's success. So Tiny Epic Quest has settled in as one of the more popular and often played entries in the series. Personally, I agree with Tom Vassell on this one. Just because a game can be tiny